Hi, Michael Bettine here again. Thanks for tuning in. This is the second part of how to record your gongs, singing bowls, bells, and other resonant metals. Today we're going to look at microphones. Probably the most important link in your chain, because if you've got a crappy mic, no matter what other equipment you have, you're not going to get a great recording. So it's important to choose the right types of microphones for what you want to do. There's a lot of different mics out there and a lot of different types. So we're going to go through a few of them. First off, we want to look at your basic karaoke style microphone. This usually has a built-in cord and a 1/4-inch plug on the end. And these are pretty cheap. You really don't want to use it unless it's the only microphone you have at your disposal, because you're not going to get high quality recording from it. If you're singing karaoke at a friend's or out in a bar or something, it's fine. But if you're really trying to get a nice recording of your gongs or bowls or that, you want to avoid these at all costs. Next would be a USB microphone. Now, it wasn't too long ago, just a few years ago, that USB microphones were not very good quality. But with the advent of podcasting and a lot of people needing a simple to use quality mic they can just plug into their computer for podcasting, a lot of companies, big mic companies, have now started making really good quality USB mics. The problem with these are sometimes the frequency range is limited, but the main problem is it's USB, so it will only plug in to your computer. And the cords are not very long, so you're sort of stuck. You have to be right on your computer to use it. These are fine if you play guitar or ukulele, maybe do some vocals and you're sitting right there at your desk. You can get a decent recording. But if you're looking to record your gongs and bowls and stuff, I would recommend getting something better than a USB mic. But again, if it's the only mic you have, well, it's a good place to start. Use what you want. Well, let's look at cables. Like we saw in the karaoke mic, it had the 1/4-inch end plug. You can get a 3-pin to a 1/4-inch, the one on the left, the XLR to 1/4-inch cable. Problem you end up with most of those kind of cables is the longer the cable is, the more noise gets introduced into your signal. Whereas the one on the right, the standard XLR cable that has a 3-pin connector on both ends, you can run hundreds of feet of that with no added noise. And this is what you see at rock concerts all the time and in recording studios. So the mics we mainly want to look for are the kind that will use a 3-pin XLR cable on both ends. And this can plug in to the additional external inputs on your portable recorder, like your Tascam or Zune unit. They can also plug into a mixer if you're using any sort of mixer, and they can plug into a computer interface. Okay, before we look at specific microphones, we really need to understand how they work. And the most important thing is the type of directional pattern that the microphone has. Now, the microphones all have a little element in it called a diaphragm that vibrates when the sound hits. And that vibration is turned into an electrical signal, which goes through the circuitry and through the cord and into whatever it's plugged into. But microphones come with different patterns. You can get what's called omnidirectional, which means it will pick up from all over. So if we look at the illustration, if we imagine our microphone is right in the center of that circle, and that circle is a sphere or a ball. So if you put a ball around your microphone, that would be omnidirectional. It will pick up from all areas. And those are good for different things. A lot of times people recording choirs and symphony orchestras will use an omnidirectional because it picks up the sound of the instruments or the singers, but it also picks up the reverberant sound of the hall. Now, the common microphone you might see, the little clip-on lavalier microphones that you'll see people use for interviews and television and that, those are often omnidirectional. so they can pick up a person's voice. Even if they're moving their head around or their body around, they're still going to pick up the signal, and it will be consistent. The next type of pattern is called unidirectional, or most commonly known as cardioid. And we can see it's sort of an upside down heart shape. And what that does is pick up the signal from the front of the microphone. It picks up what the mic is pointed at, and it rejects sound behind the microphone diaphragm. These are great when you want to cut out background noise and just get the main source. You can also get a tighter pattern called a hypercardioid, which rejects most of the sound from the side, really only picking up what it's aimed at. Now, these would be good for recording gongs or bowls if you're looking to just, pick up the sound and don't want to get the room sound into it. A third pattern that we should look at is called a bidirectional or figure 8, as it looks like an 8. So if you can imagine the diaphragm in the middle there, it picks up front sound and sound from the rear. So these type of mics are very good when you want to just pick up the sound source and then get some ambient sound from behind. There are some other mic patterns out there, but these are probably the three main ones that people will use. Okay, let's look at some microphones. As our most basic microphone, we have something that everybody's probably familiar with, the Shure SM57 instrument microphone and the SM58 vocal microphone. These are what are called dynamic microphones, as they are not powered. You just can plug them in and they're ready to go. And they're very inexpensive. Each of them runs around $100. Now, the thing with these is their frequency range is fairly limited, and they have what is called the proximity effect, where the closer you get to the microphone, the more bass you get in the sound. Now, in a vocal microphone, that can be a very desirable characteristic because it gives you a much fuller vocal sound. Again, if these are all you have or all you can afford, you can use these to record. You won't get the highest quality, but you'll get a decent recording. I've done a surprising amount of recording with basic dynamic mics similar to this, and it's turned out okay. But these are mostly used for live applications. Or in the case of the Shure SM57, it's a favorite in the recording studio to record guitar amps with. Next, we start getting into condenser microphones. Now, a condenser microphone needs an electric current to operate. And most of the portable recorders and all the mixers and audio interfaces have what is called phantom power. And that is a circuit you can turn on that will power the microphone. As we can see here, we have an AKG P170, which runs around $199 each, or the Rode M5s, which are fairly popular, which are $199 a pair. Sometimes these are called pencil microphones because they are long and skinny, and they work well. You see these all over recording studios and in live situations. And the quality on these, you can buy these from about $50 on up to thousands of dollars, depending on your budget and, what you're doing with it. For most of our applications, real expensive microphones aren't necessary. And we can get a decent recording that we'll probably enjoy, with a microphone somewhere from $100 to $500-$600 each. Another thing about these is they're also called front address, meaning that the sound enters the front. So you point it at whatever you are recording, and that is how it will pick it up. There are two other small diaphragm condenser microphones from SE Mics, the SE7, which runs around $200 a pair, and the SE8s, which are around $500 a pair. I happen to have a pair of the SE8s that I really like. I think it's a real quality microphone. It's a great sound. And if you'll notice in the right-hand microphone in the picture, it has some switches on it. So as you move up in quality, you'll often get a few more features in a microphone. The SE8 happens to have a low-pass filter, so you can cut out the rumble sort of sound. And it also has what's called a mic pad. So if you have an extremely loud source, you can pad it, which backs off the signal a bit so you won't overload and get distortion. But a lot of the better microphones will have additional switches and features like this, where the others are more basic, and you just plug them in, and that's what you get. Now let's look at some large diaphragm condenser microphones. And they're called this because they have a much larger diaphragm, often an inch in diameter or so. And that tends to pick up a little more signal and give you a fuller sound. You can see the AKG C3000 runs about $280. The SEX1S runs about $179. Or we can look at some more expensive ones. On the right, we have the Audio-Technica 4050 for $700. And on the left, the SE4400 for about $500. And again, as you move up, you can get some additional features, whereas the first ones we looked at were just a cardioid pattern. These two microphones have switchable patterns. So you can have omnidirectional, cardioid, and a figure 8. And this is desirable if you're looking to have some versatility in how you use your microphones. I think for most people, just having a cardioid pattern would be sufficient, at least for starting out. I have a pair of the SE4400s, and I bought those specifically because I wanted a multi-pattern microphone to do different types of recording. And we'll get into different microphone setups and microphone patterns later. Some of the most popular large condenser mics are from AKG. The C214, which is just a cardioid mic at $400, or the multi-pattern version, C414, which runs around $1,100. Specialty microphones, I want to talk about two of these here. You can get the Schoeps MSTC64, which runs about $3,450. A very high quality mic, often used for orchestral and choral recording. And you can see it has two microphones on it, actually. Two microphone diaphragms, one on each end. And they are set up in the ORTF pattern, which we will talk about later. On the right-hand side is the Superlux S502, which runs about $260. It is a Chinese copy of the Schoeps microphone. Obviously, you're not going to get the same overall quality, but it's a surprisingly great microphone for the price. I have one of those, and the one I have has been modified. Now, if you get into microphones, you will find there is a whole industry in microphone modification, especially in the less expensive Chinese microphones. Many of the imported microphones are based on famous designs and are copies of famous, more expensive microphones. But they use lesser quality parts, especially in the actual diaphragms and electronics. So there are quite a few people out there who will modify microphones for you. And some of the things they do, they may put in a better diaphragm, and they often upgrade the electronics with better capacitors and transformers and other parts. So a lot of people will buy inexpensive Chinese mics and then have them modded so that they have a much better sounding mic, yet it doesn't cost as much as the famous one that it's copied after. So I have the Superlux, and it was modified by a gentleman named John Bunnell, who unfortunately doesn't do modifications anymore. But I bought this one from a recording enthusiast who had it modified because he recorded choral groups. And I really like the mic. I love the sound, and I use it all the time. So let's get into talking about microphone patterns then. There's a lot of different ways you can set up two patterns to record stereo. If we look up in the upper left of the picture here, we have probably the most popular version, the XY, where we have two microphones aiming at a 90-degree angle from each other. And this gets us a nice stereo signal. Next to that, we have the ORTF, which I'll talk about in a moment. In the lower left, we have the plumb line array, which is basically a XY type pattern only using figure 8 microphones. So you are picking up the source and the ambient sound behind. And then in the lower right, we have the mid side, which uses a cardioid mic pointing forwards and then a figure 8 mic pointing to the side to pick up the ambience. It's a very special type pattern, and you need to decode it because you actually have 3 signals, the left and right ambient and then the front signal. But the advantage of this, it allows you to change the sound field from very narrow to very wide. So it is popular in a lot of different types of recording. I think, again, especially classical music and a few others. All right, we're going to talk about the ORTF microphone pattern and a similar one, the NOS microphone pattern. Now, ORTF stands for Office de Radiodiffusion Télévision Français, which is the former French public radio and television service. And they came up with this very specific pattern for microphone placement. And what it is, the diaphragms need to be 17 centimeters apart at a 110-degree angle from each other. The idea here is to simulate the human ears. The space between our ears is approximately 17 centimeters. So this is designed to get a very natural sounding recording. And it's especially used in classical music, choral music, places like that, where the microphone will be put up high in the air and will catch a very spatial sort of sound from everything. Now the NOS is very similar. NOS is the Nederlandse Omroep Stichting, which is the Dutch Broadcast Foundation. And their specification is to have the diaphragms 30 centimeters apart at a 90-degree angle from each other. So again, very similar, but a little wider sound field. There are a few other patterns that are similar to this that people have used over the years. Sometimes people come up with their own variations. But these two are very popular and still used a lot. As I said earlier, I like to use the ORTF, and I have that specific Superlux microphone set up in that pattern, which makes it real easy. I don't have to mess around trying to get everything at the right angle and the right distance and that. I just put that up and I'm good to go. I like to combine an XY set and an ORTF set so that in post-production I can pick one or the other or possibly blend them. And even on different parts of the music, there might be a section where the XY gives you the sort of sound you want, and another part where the ORTF gives you the sound where you want. So I'm always about options. That's why when I'm using my Zoom H6, I always have the XY microphone set up on that, and then I use the ORTF into the external inputs. Okay, now that we have our mics, let's talk about how do we hold them. So for our standard dynamic mics and most of these small diaphragm condensers, we can just get a standard mic clip like the one on the left, or even a spring-loaded one that will fit different size microphones on the right. And here we can see a Shure SM58 on the left and a standard small diaphragm condenser on the right in a clip. And these are great. Most microphones will come with some sort of clip. Easy to use. You just snap it in, screw it onto a mic stand, and you are ready to go. But we have these other type of mic holders called shock mounts, which is really a holder within a holder suspended by an elastic cord. And the idea here is to reduce any external sound that might go through the microphone. If you take a microphone and just a standard clip, put it on your mic stand and tap the mic stand, you will hear the tapping coming through. Or in the case of a lot of places, especially a wooden floor or something, if you stomp on the floor, the sound will come through the mic stand and through the microphone. So a shock mount is designed to suspend the mic so that the elastic cord takes up any sort of movement or vibration, and it's not transferred through the microphone. The one thing you do have to watch is that you leave slack in your cord because if you pull the cord taut, that can defeat the whole purpose of the shock mount. But this is a typical shock mounts that you'll find for different types of microphones. So let's look at this. Here's some SDC mics in shock mounts. On the left, we have a Vanguard mic in a shock mount that really, instead of elastic bands, it uses rubber rings to hold the mic, which does the same sort of cushioning. And on the right-hand side, we have a small condenser mic in a standard shock mount. Now, shock mounts can be very simple, as we see, or they can be very elaborate. Let's look at some large condenser mics. We have the SE 4400 on the left and the good old AKG C414 on the right. With a lot of condenser mics, they will not fit into a standard clip, so you do have to use a shock mount. And many of the shock mounts are especially made for this specific microphone. When I'm recording in the field, I usually just use small diaphragm condensers with clips because it's quicker and it's much easier than trying to set up shock mounts. Basically now I just use my ORTF microphone, which does have a rubberized ring shock mount, similar to the one that we saw with the Vanguard mic in it. So that's just sort of an overview of microphones and clips and mounts. The best thing you can do is get on the internet and do some research. Look up small diaphragm condenser mic. Look up large diaphragm condenser mic. Look up shock mounts. Look up microphone patterns. All these different things. When I was really getting into this is what I did. Lots and lots of research to find things and to learn things. You can also go on YouTube. And if you know specific microphone models, like the C414 from AKG, there's probably a YouTube video about that microphone and probably a comparison video comparing it to some other ones. So Google and YouTube are two of your best friends for learning about mics and recording. Don't be afraid to use them. I keep one in my studio here for use. I have one of my 4400s in a shock mount here, and you can see, it moves around. I've got the cord loosely, so there's plenty of play in there. It's not going to cause me any problems, any extra sound. For most of us, for most things we do, a standard mic clip is fine. I rarely use the shock mounts outside of my studio unless I'm really looking to get a quality recording, like playing in a church or cathedral, something that's got a really beautiful sound, or a really nice hall, like a theater or something. Then I will probably take the trouble to bring the shock mounts and set them up, because it will lessen the possibility of getting any sort of extra noise. But for most everything I do, I just pop it in the standard mic clip and I'm good to go.